I've always fell into bad places when I start to overthink, and then the fear that was, say, created in my past starts to control my future and where I'm headed.
What is life as a creative, an entrepreneur, really mean in this mental health space? And being a little bit transparent, being a little bit more vulnerable, or both. I don't know. That's a conversation for later, because I didn't know there was a true difference like that. But it really started off of this clip that I saw from what's his name? Simon.
Sinek. Simon
That
Sinek.
guy.
Yeah.
Him. He was talking on the Diary of CEO about his gripe about calling it mental health, and it really opened my eyes to like, yo, we gotta talk about the different definitions of everything, because there's different definitions of success. There's different definition of happiness. So I think it applies also to what we think of mental health. So this is what he said that sparked off this whole episode.
And I've realized I actually don't like the term mental health, because at the end of the day, like, think about your body when you go to the gym, right? We call that fitness. And some days you have good days at the gym, and some days you have bad days at the gym. Some days your body feels amazing, you can lift huge weight. And some day, for whatever reason, you got enough sleep, you're eating well, you're hydrated, your body's just not working that day. And we're all familiar with that. And it doesn't really bother us. You're like, bad day today. And you move on. And you allow that to happen. But we don't treat our mental fitness the same way.
So my question to you, Moose, is what does mental health mean to you in your life?
Yeah. It's funny because I grew up probably more with the understanding of the term mindset rather than mental health. I think it's really both the same, but it started for me as mindset. It's the way you think and how what you think about makes you feel, and how those emotions then end up triggering some form of response or an action in your day-to-day life. And those three combined create your life, right? That's ultimately the experience that you live in. So I've always looked at it from the position of a mindset, right? It's about keeping good, positive, healthy thoughts in my mind about myself, first and foremost, and about what's to come in the future. Some people say that there is a part of it that also it dabbles in the past, right? It's also how you process and think about the past. I think I've never really struggled too much with thinking about the past. It was always more about the worry of the future. That if I ever fell into a funk, it was, oh shoot, mentally I'm in that place because I don't feel too good about where we're headed. So that for me was typically where I would trip up when it comes to mental health, or how I often refer to it as mindset, quite honestly.
So, okay, so you think about the future, which is great, right? Because I love how you identified that there is two different parts of some people just have that trauma from the past, and some just have pure anxiety of the future, right? So for you, when we're talking about like mental health in kind of like your world, what are like some of the triggers for you that makes you know, hold on, this is something to pay attention to, right?
Yeah.
And like, how did you deal with it before, and how do you deal with it now?
So I think for me, I've always fell into bad places when I start to overthink, and then the fear that was, say, created in my past starts to control my future and where I'm headed. Like, and unfortunately, and I think this is the case for most people in the beginning of their journeys, they're not really super specific or clear on what does that cycle look like for you? When does it start? How does it start? What is it? What are the impacts and implications of it? And so in the beginning, I think I said it on one of the podcasts here, that I would have what I just called, oh, this is my high season. Everything's going great. I feel amazing. Let's go. And then there were times where I was like, oh, this is just the bad season. Probably gonna take about 3-4 months, and I just gotta wait it out. I didn't know that you can actually do something about it to try to handle, neutralize those situations as best as you can, and also do something to stay on top as best as you can. So I don't think anyone lives a perfect life. I don't know that anyone is just always absolutely bulletproof from a mindset or mental health standpoint. But I know for me, it always started with that overthinking. I'm overthinking about something because things are not going the way I want to, or I'm experiencing delays, or there's some, again, insecurity about the future. And then you start questioning and doubting yourself, and then fear starts to kick in. And before you know it, you've crawled into this ball of emotion where much of it hasn't really happened yet and could probably never happen. But it's this like premeditated idea of what the future will look like, and you made it 100 times worse than what it is because of just how you're feeling in the moment. That's how it's always felt for me. As I reflect on it, that's how it's always, it's the overthinking paired with the fear. Bad place for me. Bad place.
Is it paralyzing? Is it like, I don't move? Because like me personally knowing you, you think constantly. So I don't think it stops you from thinking, but does it stop like you from doing other things?
No, I wouldn't say it stops me. I think that it just creates a great deal of worry. Like you're incredibly worried, and you justify it by saying, yeah, but think about the responsibilities, and I'm doing it because, oh my God, but what's going to happen here? And what about this? And so the mind will always find ways to justify what you're feeling so that you don't go crazy. But that doesn't mean that what you're thinking is right, even still. So that's a big pattern that I've caught on for myself.
That's fair. I do like from the clip how he referenced it. I think for me, when we hear mental health, it's always attached to another word, right? I think it's mental health issues, mental health illness. We never really talk about like mental health, period, right? I think now, as it all came to life during COVID and people had to sit with it, I think for me, I look at it not like similar to what he says, but not really, because I mean, you need health, just in general, how he put it. You have your health and you have fitness to help your health, right? So you have the mental health of like how your mind is in general, right? Where it's at. Is it a good sense of health? Is it a bad sense of health from a mental standpoint? And the mental fitness is what keeps it strong. Regardless if you have a bad day or not, what you're doing with your mental fitness is there to condition it, right? So that's kind of how I look at it from how he's talking about it. For me, going on the point of what you said with, is it about past traumas or is it more of the future? For me, I think it's past and present, not so much future, right? If like the present feels overwhelming, if I get triggered by 3, which is common because 3 is my favorite number, right? So if 3 things happen back to back, it's like, all right, what are we doing? Like, what's happening, right? In the beginning of COVID, I got hit with depression in the very beginning, right? And that's because I had to finally sit down and deal with issues that happened in the past, right? Recently, I've opened up about my depression that happened this year, and that was because of everything that was happening in the present, of not feeling from a creative standpoint, not feeling heard, not feeling that I had the creative freedom that I wanted to do, stuck in certain places that I was battling with, and it just seemed a lot of things, and then a lot of the personal stuff between, grandma being in the hospital and that whole nine. So with being in the Navy, they deemed me as being depressed and all that great stuff, boom, 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 and it carried out afterwards. It wasn't, until until COVID. No, I, I went to therapy once I got out of the Navy, but I didn't stick to it. And then COVID really made me understand uh, the importance of, like, what are you doing to get yourself right? And that's where the mental fitness part comes in, of what are some of the exercises you're doing? What are some of the things that you can pretty much do to put in your toolbox to continue to keep you happy? And one of the clips that I saw was this Olympic medalist. I think she was a skier, right? And she was talking about, yo, people see the success, and we'll get into that, right? People see the success, but they're not talking about you going into these different countries by yourself. The loneliness hits. Simon, even in that interview, was like, I'm in a place where I'm lonely. And some people don't know how to deal with lonely, right? I think that's why I'm getting a dog, because that's one of my, like, yo, you are killing it, but you are home, like, dealing with your own thoughts. There's no true distractions. All the distractions that you had before is not working. Hello. Let's figure something else out. Went back to thinking like, oh, I always had a dog. Let me get a dog, right? So I do agree with the mental fitness part, but not for it to completely negate what mental health is. I think it's a tool to have good and balanced mental health. That's what I think about that.
Yeah, I mean, it's grown too. I think that a lot of the labels that are started to come about have made it more from its own independent thing to kind of what I refer to as the mindset, or just how you feel in general today, to, oh, this is almost like a conclusion. You've been diagnosed. It's a medical condition. So I think a lot of the labels have added to it. But what I like about the state of where it's at right now is that it's showing you that there are things that you can do to proactively keep it in check, because it's normal amongst all humans. It's not, and I would say we're pretty much out of that phase where it's looked at as weird, or say not as strong, or any of those things that you're talking about mental health. It's more of, okay, this is something that all people deal with, regardless of age, sex, whatever stage of life you're at. You got a mind, you got to regulate your mind. You got to take care of your mind. So that's where I know that crossroad, and I guess that's where Simon Sinek is referring to, that crossroad of, we make a big deal out of all things related to mental health if one day you don't feel well. And if in another category of your life that happened, you had a bad business day, you had a bad day at the gym, you're like, okay, it's just a bad day. Get them next time. But I think it became so adopted that people unfortunately put themselves into those bad positions just because the conversation was so normal all around them. So a person may have not necessarily had a condition, a mental health condition or an issue, as you mentioned, but because the noise was so loud around that it became normal for you to be associated with it and say, oh, I think I'm depressed. And again, not talking down depression in any, means, but I do feel that there was a part of that happened at some point where people put themselves in that position rather than saying, no, just a bad day, let's go at it. Now, if you go 4, 5, 6 months, and this is becoming your everyday, certainly, and I wouldn't suggest anyone stay at it for that long, but I know there was that transition of, okay, normal to have the conversation. Don't just subscribe to it because it's well known all around us, but there's a health aspect to it that you can look at regularly on a daily basis. That's the part about the word health being added to it that I think lets you know that, oh, there's something that you should be doing to this daily, because most people may work out daily or a couple of times a week. Most people eat every day, and there's a health component to what you eat every day. So the minute you start to think about what you consume from a mindset standpoint on a daily basis, you don't have those long lapse times where, again, talking just to my experience, in 3 months, like, oh, what happened? Oh, I stopped working out. Or, oh, I wasn't as consistent in my prayers. But I wouldn't know until 3-4 months later. So it's much better today, at least when you think about it from that standpoint.